Today's episode of Off Color is brought to you by Symbiotic Swag. Symbiotic Swag is an apparel company with a purpose. Wear the change. Carry a message of cooperation, community, and hope into the world. Everything about this company is symbiotic, not just the messages. 15% of the profits from every single thing they make is given to a grassroots organization that fits the theme of the product. www.symbioticswag.com. Enter the code ALLCOLORS to get your special 10% discount. You are listening to Off Color, a podcast where 1.5 Black people and James talk about race and help you learn how to talk about race and racism, hopefully. I'm Rebecca Henderson. I'm the 0.5.
I'm Dr. Gregory Diggs, 1.0.
I'm James.
And this is Off Color.
All right, so I think we're good to go, yeah?
I
think we're feeling a little fired up tonight.
Yeah. Well,
Fired it up.
I mean, we just
ready to go.
I mean, there was just some shit going down like hours prior to this. Yeah, should we open with that? You want to get into that later?
I feel like I probably need to get that off my chest before
What's going on?
Let's talk about
get into other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I am not feeling great about men in general. This is not a secret if you know me. I have been known to say men are trash basically several times a day. That's something that is happening right now because I am very unhappy with the way things are going. I was pretty excited that, Me Too was the Time Person of the Year, this idea of the silence breakers and stuff. And so in light of that, what happened this evening on Twitter was kind of unbelievable almost to me. Like, I can't believe that people are still needing to get checked and educated like this.
What happened on Twitter?
Oh.
First of all, let's say on Twitter, @OffColorPod, if you have anything to say to us or about us. But Rebecca also has a personal Twitter account. She's not like a super Twitterer, but she posted a little something that got some notice today.
It did. So a friend of mine who's a writer, she posted on Facebook that she called out Michael Rapaport. And Michael Rapaport, I don't know if people remember him or know who he is. I remember him from the film Zebrahead, and he used to run around with like Spike Lee, and I think he was in
he's in a bunch of Spike movies,
Bamboozled, yeah. And so he was like what we called in Westchester County, which is where I grew up. He's what we would call like a wigger. I don't know. I don't think people still use that term.
No,
I think it's an old term.
We know
what it is, right?
Yeah, we know the term.
So, and he was just like this white boy that clearly like wished he was black, that kind of situation. And I have not thought about that dude in a long time, but I always thought I actually thought he was like all right, because I was like, he loves black people. He's okay.
And he's sort of having like a third act career now as like a podcasting, like sports commentator. He's kind of just one of these guys who like yells into his forward-facing camera about shit. He gets a lot of likes for it. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, and he sometimes gets in trouble about that too.
Yeah, yeah. So I
and he recently got in trouble due to the Dustin Hoffman thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Dustin Hoffman is yet another piece of trash, as I like to call men, that has been called out. And he was called out by not a piece of trash, Jamie Oliver.
John Oliver.
Jamie Oliver.
Not Jamie. To my knowledge, Jamie Oliver is also not a piece of trash, but he did not have a public confrontation with Dustin Hoffman.
Oh, man.
It's all good.
Okay,
so if we don't... Well, Dr. Diggs didn't know. We chatted a little bit about this. Wasn't up on the Dustin Hoffman thing. So,
I was not up on the
So Dustin Hoffman was in a production of Death of a Salesman like 30 years ago, I guess, on Broadway. And a young not even an actress, like someone involved, like a stagehand or something. I obviously don't fully remember. Detailed a really pretty horrific, long, repetitive series of incidents of sexual harassment from him.
Okay.
While working on that, and then just this morning, an actress who was in that production came out with an article saying that Hoffman specifically cast her basically to groom her to kind of sexually intimidate and assault her for the entire run of the play.
My goodness.
So Dustin Hoffman is like now in a really, really bad situation in terms of these things. And John Oliver called him on it during a junket for like the 30th anniversary of Tootsie or something.
I think it was Wag the Dog.
Wag the Dog. And that makes more sense. That's more people are going to show up for a junket celebrating Wag the Dog than Tootsie. But anyway, the big story of that was that John Oliver was chairing that panel. And John Oliver was just sort of like, look, this is the elephant in the room. We're going to talk about this. And he brought it up, and Hoffman's back was up against the wall, and it like popped off. Like if you watch the video, it's amazing. The audience is yelling at each other.
Wow.
Half the audience is yelling at John Oliver to shut up. Half the audience is yelling at him, supporting him for calling this guy out.
Oh, I can't wait.
Well, Rapaport's take was, Hoffman is Hollywood royalty, and who the fuck are you, John Oliver? And you shouldn't be blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
and
call him Mr. Hoffman and all this
just to give some context for then what happened.
Yeah, so then my girlfriend, a kind of maybe a little bit confrontational tweet, but nothing, crazy. She said, are you going to keep flapping your lips? Something like that. You're going to keep flapping your lips for Dustin Hoffman, are you going to apologize
in light of this
new thing? And his response was, homie, I got something for you to flap your lips on. Okay, that was his response to her calling him out for defending essentially like a sexual predator.
So basically, like, not even a double down, like worse than a double down, not even like, okay, in light of this article, I'm still supporting Dustin Hoffman. It was like, suck my dick for bringing it up.
Right.
Was basically the response.
Right. Yeah, and it was, when I saw it, I saw red, right? Because I'm just so sick of all this stuff. And it's just something as a woman that I've just been dealing with for X amount of years. And it just made me so angry to see that response. And it wasn't even that it was about like Michael Rapaport. It wasn't that. It was that was his response.
Right.
Was to say, suck my dick.
Like, read the fucking room. Like, the moment that we're in, get some sense of the gravitas of what this conversation is and what's happening in the culture.
Yes.
Maybe. And take a minute to be humble.
Yeah. And so that is basically where I got upset. So I took a picture, a screenshot, I took her screenshot. I tweeted it and I said, this is the kind of trash that Michael Rapaport, responded to my friend to. He retweets that, but with no comment, nothing.
Yeah.
He just retweeted it in the hopes and the expectation that his followers were going to come for me. And they did.
That's when I saw it. And that pissed me off, because I was just sort of like, man, what a fucking coward move. Like, if he responded to you with some more suck my dick shit or whatever, that would be awful. But at least I could be like, okay, he's clapping back in this an argument. But the cowardice of being like, hey, I have 250,000 Twitter followers, so let me just retweet some stranger just so my minions can just go off on them.
Yeah, and they did. And they did. And they went off on my friend also. And then he tweeted at me saying, that the stuff that he said was so...
You gonna share any of that, or
yes, I'm going to share because I just want to look at it because it's just kind of.
And this is stuff you can look at yourself. We release this podcast on Mondays, but this is Friday, December 8th. So if you look at Michael Rapaport's timeline from that date, you'll see whatever this is, assuming he hasn't deleted it.
Oh yeah, by then. Yeah.
By then.
So his response to me was, and not just me, one other, a couple other people, but you wouldn't give a fuck about any of this if it was Jane Doe and John Doe. You're a 2-bit gossip. If these were nameless people, you would walk past like you've always done.
Because everybody walks around with Michael Rapaport thinking in their head.
No, Michael Rapaport is like half a step above John Doe.
I mean, so that was his answer. And then, my girl was like, what are you talking about? A family member of mine was sexually assaulted by Dustin Hoffman at 16 years old. So it's not even just that. This is like a real situation where she's calling him out specifically because of her personal connection to it. And all he can talk about is how we want to get on some celebrity shit. And that is just so, I'm ready to murder right now.
That's also
not really.
It's also a completely bullshit response because this is the guy who came out calling out John Oliver for the way that he did it.
Right.
So, yeah. No shit. If you didn't see footage of that press junket, you also wouldn't weigh in on that conversation, Michael Rapaport. Yes, we're talking about fucking public figures.
Yeah.
Like, how is that a point? To be like, oh, yeah, nobody cares about rape when it's John Doe. Like, what? Like, that's your response?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Again, just like humble yourself. Just read the room of what moment we're in right now. And maybe think.
And then he also had another one where he was like, these chicken heads are trying to get on the gram. And I'm like...
What?
He's always using fucking 1994 hip-hop slang.
So
chicken heads.
And
When
that's
was the last time you heard chicken
it's
heads?
been a minute, but I still was offended.
Yeah.
Well, I think you should be offended.
He was a real buster, I gotta tell you.
Well, and that's, again, I as an older person, I still like marvel at these phenomena because it's like this phenomenon where you've got a white person who's trying to appropriate blackness.
Let's just also mention that his Twitter picture, he has an afro wig on, a black afro wig. Now that dude has some kinky curly hair. That is true. Mm-hmm. He's like a weird ginger. Sorry, gingers.
That's true. Worries. He already has an afro.
He already has it, but then he has the afro put on top of his hair as a picture, and that made me mad too, for obvious reasons.
So this guy thinks because he played basketball back in the day and wanted to be an NBA player, his wife, his partner is African American. There's this phenomenon where people think they are so down that they can just say whatever the fuck they want to, in whatever way they want to. It's like, yeah, no, homie, you don't really have it like that.
I mean, there's no doubt that he is a little too comfortable with himself as far as that goes. But actually, apropos of this situation, I actually think the relationship that's less interesting than his relationship with Spike and with black culture is his relationship with Woody Allen. That's maybe really the conversation, is because the two directors who have put Michael Rapaport on are Spike Lee and Woody Allen.
Well, damn.
And so the amount of, and Michael Rapaport is not alone in this, the amount of fucking mental gymnastics you need to do to work with Woody Allen in the 21st century gives you some insight into why he would think that Dustin Hoffman's behavior is no big deal.
I was so pissed off, that was, and then, his other tweet about it was, I didn't even say, suck my dick.
Right.
I didn't even say that. I just said, I have something for you to flap your lips on.
That's
Come on, man.
Lawyerly child. Anybody who's got kids has had that. Well, technically, I didn't say.
Come on, man.
So it was just the whole thing made me like really angry. And also, like I said, like you're right. I'm hardly on Twitter. Nobody cares about my Twitter feed. I'm like, I read a book today. Like it's nothing. And so,
but it is something. And I think, and we're not going to talk about all of this tonight, but I think it is something because it is part of this regular, normal, white male, misogynistic culture that we have that we don't talk about. Mm-hmm. And so it's normal for him to just pop off. Yeah. And the way it used to be is people could do it that way and nobody would say anything.
Yeah.
But now what's going on is that some people with whatever followers she has says, you know what? Fuck you, motherfucker. You know?
Yeah.
And then you know it's real because he has to respond.
Right.
With all his 250 million followers, whatever, he has to respond because now we're in a climate where that bullshit, excuse my French, gets called out by regular people.
Right.
Yeah.
Which what it does is explodes. It disrupts the normalcy
Yeah.
of these kinds of exchanges.
I think
like,
you're right.
you know what? You can't just say that.
Right, and a guy like him is not prepared for it at all, because a guy like him comes from a world. It's funny, when I see a guy like Michael Rapaport, or fucking God forbid, Donald Trump, I'm from New York, and I'm from the New York burbs of the city, very close to New Jersey. Guys like Michael Rapaport are a dime a dozen. Loud ass, opinionated, fake tough guys are all you ever run into anywhere. And a guy like him, honestly, went his whole life never blinking at the notion that telling a stranger to suck your dick is maybe inappropriate behavior. That is how normal that kind of talk is. I honestly, truly think he's not an idiot. He's media savvy enough. You would think that he would know enough to know that responding to this kind of conversation in that kind of way is idiotic.
But
and
that's
clearly
he
doesn't.
That's a new day. That
right.
So that
He's
right
not
there
living
is a
in
new
that day yet.
In the recent past, all of that stuff was normal.
Very recent past.
Was
Yeah, like
normal.
last week and shit.
Yeah.
Like last week, that was normal.
No exaggeration. We're talking, I mean, the John Oliver thing. Picture that happening in 2016.
No way.
We're in a moment. It's very easy, especially in the internet age. It's very easy to look at a blip on the radar and think something big is happening. That's not what this is. Something big is happening. Shit is happening today that would not have happened 10 years ago, would not have happened 10 months ago in a lot of circumstances. We are in a sea change culturally, and you're either going to be on board or you're going to be Michael Rapaport.
You know, it used to be that everybody gave a fuck. Man, some people have no more fucks to give on certain things. Women are tired of being objectified and abused. People of color are tired of being, colonized and abused. And part of the challenge is we have not been talking about it. But it's kind of a new day. For whatever reasons you think, today is not yesterday, A lot of us are having feelings.
Well, I find that I have a really hard time articulating my feelings in a way that I feel like is, I don't know, palatable or able for people to understand what I'm trying to say. And I'm saying that because when the Time cover broke and everyone was rejoicing that it was, the Silence Breakers, I looked at that cover of Time magazine and I was like looking at Taylor Swift like, And not because I want to invalidate what happened to her, not because I don't know the story. It was in Denver. Hello, I live here. It was a big deal.
Yes.
And it wasn't that. It was just all I could think of was I was like, oh my gosh, this. Why is she on the cover? That was my feeling I had.
But so why do
we
you
know very
so
well
why
why
do you
she's
think?
on the cover?
Why is she on the cover? Tell us.
Do I really have to say it?
It's a podcast. That's why
If you don't say it, nobody hears it.
Okay, she was on the cover because she's white. And she has a big fan base, I guess, and all, and
it's
and
sexy.
kind of
It'll
thing.
sell magazines.
I mean, that's
right?
fundamentally what it is. It sells magazines.
Okay, but can I just say this
You
though?
can say what you gotta say.
Also, so it wasn't just that. It was then I saw it. I didn't say anything, and then I need to just get off Twitter. I swear to God. So, so I looked
and
at
everybody
it,
else.
and then Awesomely Lovey, who I enjoy her, and she's very funny and she keeps it real and stuff. And she had posted a piece about that she was upset about Taylor Swift being on the cover, and
that's what is it? Luvvie.
Yeah, she broke it down.
She's I'll be honest, I didn't know her prior, but she's, I guess, a pretty popular blogger.
Yeah, and she has a book out. It's like a bestseller, and she has all kinds of stuff. So then Awesomely Lovey, right? And it was just that Tarana Burke was the woman who, like, 10 years ago came up with the Me Too as part of, like, her work.
Woman of color.
Yeah, and she was in the magazine. She was in there, and I feel like that's good, but it was just something about that, like, rubbed me the wrong way, you know, that she wasn't on the cover. I feel like she should have been on the cover, and she wasn't. And it made me feel...
She's not going to sell as many magazines.
Right, but it made me feel a certain way.
Sure.
And it made Awesomely Lovey feel a certain way.
Sure.
And the response of the white women was, I'm not going to buy your book. I can't believe you would do this to Taylor. I used to love you.
Taylor.
How could you do this? You know? And it was like they can't even hear us.
Right.
They can't even hear us when she's just... Clearly, like me as a woman of color reading that, I was like, I feel you. That was my response to it. I was like, that's kind of how I felt. And I feel like if those white women wouldn't respond in that way, then...
But see, that's the way, okay? And here's what I'm going to say because I'm old. This particular situation is new, but it goes way, way, way back. So if you look up the suffrage movement, okay? That was actually white women and women of color, black women, working hard together to get the right to vote. But at the end of the day, we find out that white women were like, you know what? If we can get the right to vote, that black stuff, that's not so important. The true colors, actually, but it goes way back. People will tell you how they really feel. Another funnier thing, but it's the same thing. I want to take you back to around February of 2008 when Oprah Winfrey introduced Barack Obama at a campaign, I think it was in North Carolina. And one of the things she did was she doesn't endorse politicians, she doesn't introduce politicians, but she gets in front of this crowd, and before she really makes her remarks, she said something like, do y'all think I'm nervous? And the crowd goes wild. And she says this, you're damn straight I'm nervous. And then she introduces the president. Now, the feedback from white folks, and white folks are a large part of Oprah Winfrey's audience, they lost their minds. They were saying stuff like, she doesn't talk like that. She's pandering to people of color.
That's funny.
And I'm laughing because I'm like, look, and full disclosure, I don't know Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, really?
No, but listen to what I'm about to say. But she graduated from Tennessee State University, which is where I graduated from.
Yeah.
And because I know the culture and the climate there, I guarantee you, the way Oprah Winfrey speaks on her shows and in public is not her first orientation.
Of course.
Mm-hmm. She is well-versed in black vernacular. She is well-versed in black culture. And I guarantee you, in certain situations, she will speak black. But the nice white ladies think like, how dare you pander by not speaking white? And so there's this whole phenomenon. Like we are supposed, and it ties into all the other things we're talking about. Because I can tell you, I go to work every day and I do my presentation, my interaction with colleagues white, right? Because that's how we do. But then people think that's how it is and they lose their minds. They lose their minds if you do anything even a little tiny bit off color. If you get what I'm saying.
But that goes back to what I was saying maybe a couple episodes back, maybe the first episode, when I was talking about that quote from Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Right.
About how, code switching and stuff like that, that is in a lot of ways, a specifically black experience and something that all black people are well versed in. Mm-hmm. But it's also normal human behavior. Everybody's a different person at work than they are at home. But for some reason, the permission to do that is not extended.
That's right.
In those circumstances.
That's right.
We all know that we talk different in front of different people.
Right.
There's not a human being alive who doesn't.
Right.
But it's only pandering when you see certain people do it in certain environments.
The normal rules do not apply to everyone.
Right.
That's the lesson of America. You can't take a knee and protest because now everybody else can do it. But if you're a person of color, it's like, oh my goodness.
You can be the president and talk about American carnage and what a shithole our country is and how we haven't won anything in 100 years. And somehow you get to be president.
Right.
But you take a knee during the national anthem and you've disrespected the country. I mean, the double standard it's so obvious that it's almost irritating to have to point it out.
It's mind-blowing because liberty and freedom is not meant for people of color.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you even speak of it, somehow you are ungrateful. We're supposed to be grateful for our oppression. We're supposed to take our oppression with a smile because aren't you lucky to just be here in the first place? Or as somebody said, it was better for all of us back in slavery days because we cared about each other.
That's a whole... Okay, I want to get into that.
I didn't mean to do that.
Can I say, I think we have some more maybe Time Magazine things we want to say. Yeah. My thing about Tarana Burke, and maybe you'll agree with this and maybe you won't, and with Taylor Swift and all, I'm not really... I understand why people are pushing for Tarana Burke to get more recognition, of course. I understand that she came up with the idea 10 years ago. But I also understand that celebrities move papers and that Person of the Year and magazine colors and stuff is a lot to do with social impact.
Sure.
And for all sorts of reasons, Tarana Burke was not the person who had the social impact publicly. So I get that. The exclusion that bothers me is Lupita. She's nowhere to be found in the entire article, let alone on the cover. Now, she was a Weinstein accuser with a very, very specifically articulated accusation. And she's the only accuser that Weinstein specifically publicly discredited and insulted.
Wow.
The only one. And it's a lot like what we see with Trump, where Trump shits on everybody, but there's a special kind of shit that he puts on people of color and especially women of color. And to me, the fact that first of all, her star is so on the rise. She's a big deal. Yeah. And she had this accusation that was really horrific and really detailed. And it's the only one that Weinstein seemed to feel the need to publicly defend himself against. And she's not in the story. To me, that was actually the bigger exclusion that actually told more of the story about how these different stories get told and what the dynamic is.
So what do you think about that, Rebecca?
I don't disagree. I'm not going to lie. That was also in that article.
Was it?
Yes, it was. She talked about that.
That's certainly not a unique complaint on my part. I saw a lot of that on Twitter.
No, that was that because, so I just think I'm extra mad in general right now. And I'm particularly mad, at white ladies. And I think that is some of my, anger about it and looking at Taylor Swift and just being or just my feelings about it. And
can you talk about that a little bit? Maybe not just in the context of Taylor, because I see and hear that sort of thing. And of course I saw the signs, at the Women's March, about, we hope to see all you nice white ladies at the next Black Lives Matter rally and whatever. And I understand that discord, but I suspect, because I don't fully get it myself, I suspect there are a lot of listeners, many of whom are probably white women themselves, who maybe don't quite get the beef. What is it? Where does the frustration lie?
I can only speak for myself, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. something that had just came up in my personal life, and I was looking for a little bit of guidance. Sometimes I come to Dr. Diggs and ask him to kind of help me work through some things. So here in Denver, I went to see a play written by a young playwright, and it's called Black with a capital B. And it's a very simple production. It's about 20, 30 minutes. And then after it, you're supposed to have an open and honest conversation about race.
Literally in the room.
In the room. So it was at a church, and there's two characters. One is black, one is white. They're two women, and they're having this conversation where it's clearly they're at the funeral of a young black man that has been shot and is dead. And then people in the audience are calling out the names. They're saying, Trayvon Martin,
right?
Yeah, Sandra Bland. They're doing that.
Where is this playing?
They move around. It's the Curious Minds Theater Company.
Okay. And
so I was, looking forward to seeing the show. We'll probably have the actress on, Alicia Gray. She's one of the actors that was in it. And anyway, and so the play was really moving to me. It brought up a lot of emotions for me. I have lost a family member to, he died being shot by the police. And so of course for me, it does bring up some feelings, some thoughts. And after the play was done, they opened up the floor and they said, who would like to say something? And this is something that's been bothering me for a while now that I haven't been able to say because I'm like scared to say it. But I feel frustrated by our allies, our white allies in the struggle, because sometimes it just feels like a hobby to them. Like it feels like they're like, as Dr. Diggs called it, like a recreational wokeness. Like they're doing that, and that's happening now where we live, and people are getting, involved and getting fired up, and they're marching in the streets and stuff, and they're saying all these things on Twitter and on Facebook, but when it comes down to it, I feel like it just doesn't, something about it is bothering me.
Sure.
And I lead these conversations on race, and I am putting myself out there and letting people talk and doing that stuff. And I still, like, something is just bothering me. And I stood up in that room and I said it. I said, sometimes this is how it feels. It just feels like this is like a hobby. And I'm tired of like, white people like making their money because they're white. And I mentioned a couple of authors, and I said it. I was upset, and I cried. Like I was feeling really emotional. I said, I just feel like they're making their money on the backs of like our pain and our suffering. Right. And that feels like shit to me.
Meaning like journalists or?
No, meaning like
any ally.
I kind of don't want to be like putting people on blast because I'm not going to name the names, but just like say it was so-and-so, this author. And I said all that, and people were like, okay, and then this white lady gets up and says, well, what should we do? What, they shouldn't share their experiences? That you want us to just be quiet? And I looked at her and I was like, didn't you hear anything I just said? And it was just so frustrating to me. And then other people made comments, and and another Maria Nagawa is going to probably come on. She's a Ugandan political economist, and she stood up and she said, I think you're feeling the difference of people who are really it's like their life's work, white people who are really there and in it, versus people who are just like going to come to the rally and the Women's March one time, and they're not really committed. And that is, she said, I think you're feeling the difference between that. And I used an example, when I was talking about it, like James. I said, you and your wife, Katrina, like, I feel like I can be myself with you guys. I feel like I can say anything. I feel like you get it. I feel like you're like legit woke in a way that some other people who are maybe taking the reins on some of these movements and stuff are not. And they're making me feel a certain kind of way. And I can feel the difference.
That's powerful.
Sorry.
No, not at all. I mean, and that's good. And there's so much that I think we should get into, and there's something specific that I want Dr. Diggs to talk about. But I think just because you mentioned me. I mean, that's a thing. I mean, that's what I think about. I mean, I appreciate and I'm obviously happy that you think of me in that way. But ultimately, my big question is it really possible for any ally? And let's talk about intersectionally. Let's talk about straight people who give a shit about queer issues. Let's talk about men who give a shit about women's issues. Let's talk about any of that. Is it really possible for an ally to really be invested in a real way?
Yes.
And part two, should the conversation be more about allies being more committed, or should the conversation be more about allies acknowledging that they're not in the shit and being honest about how much they care and how much they're willing to do and how much they're able to do, but acknowledging that there's a difference between the people who are directly affected every day and the people who can afford to care.
But I feel like they say it, but there's just something like, again, it's like this, it's just like a feeling.
Sure.
Where I'm just like, I can't, like I feel upset. And Dr. Diggs knows the whole backstory, which I'm not like totally going to get into.
Sure.
But it's just, again, it's like that idea of people not listening. And even after all of that, after this kind of rich conversation where people were saying things and speaking their truths, this old white lady came up to me and said, "You mentioned my friend's name and she doesn't make money off those books. And I want you to meet her and have an authentic conversation with her." Mm-hmm. And I was like, "No, thank you." And she kept pushing. And she pushed so much that I had to say, "I'm telling you, I don't want to have this conversation with you. Please respect that."
Yeah.
That shouldn't come on me.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I ask Dr. Diggs, can you speak about, because I'm trying to address what you were talking about earlier, but I'm trying not to steal your punchline. Can you talk about white eggs and ham?
Yes. So the original concept doesn't even come from me. I think it was in the 1980s. I was in a workshop and someone who was the keynote speaker said this. They said something like, what is the difference between being involved and being committed? And the way the person presented it, it was like, if you want to think about the concept, think about it. And I was in Nashville at the time. And he said, think about a traditional Southern dish of breakfast, eggs and ham. And then he said, when you visualize that traditional dish, think about the difference between being involved and being committed in this way. For you to have that plate of eggs and country ham, the chicken, the hen, was involved, but the pig or the hog was committed.
Yeah.
That's such an amazing, stark illustration. Mm-hmm. The hen and the hog.
The hen and the hog. And here I'm going to take it a little bit further, because that's when I heard Rebecca talking about this frustration, that suddenly sprung into my mind. And I'm going to take it even a little bit further. Think about that little hen strutting around, laying eggs and stuff. And they are making a contribution, but it's almost like they feel like they're entitled to greater appreciation because, I don't have to do this, but I'm doing it and you're supposed to be extra grateful. And those of us who really have skin in, it's like, this is a life and death situation for us. And even when we survive and get older, then we start having children. And it's like, look, now it's life and death for our children. And what we do understand as people of color and difference is that even when we love our allies, our white allies, we know when they come from the meeting, when they go home and fix dinner and play with their kids, they don't have the same skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And now, I'm going to say that as a person of color, I've lived my life that way. I actually understand. But every once in a while, it is infuriating because even our allies feel like we're supposed to be grateful for their friendship. We're supposed to be grateful, for their involvement. And so we are not supposed to express any sort of concern or any sort of critique. I mean, I was in a situation, a public meeting with our neighborhood association where we're having situations in our community about race. And we were starting to speak out and criticize. At the next meeting, this nice, beautiful, intelligent person would say, well, before we get into this, let me tell you the list of things that we've come up with that we're going to do in order to increase diversity. And she went down the list, and like number 5 or 6 on the list was, and we're going to have a jazz concert, because Black people like jazz.
Yeah.
Okay? And in the room, and usually I'm prepared for most stuff, but my face like cracked.
Right.
I like gasped, and then I even the feedback I got, I don't even remember. I was so offended, but I actually laughed. And so there were people in the group that I belonged to in this neighborhood, nice white ladies who are great allies, but they were giving feedback like, I'm so offended that some of you didn't even give the woman a chance to speak, that scoffed and dismissed and stuff. And I wrote back, I said, listen, that scoff and that laugh was a polite response.
Right.
Okay? If I would have said words, don't catch me on the wrong day. Because I might tell you what I really feel. And I'm not going to be grateful for my own oppression.
Well, I will say one thing in defense of the nice white ladies, because one white lady at that meeting at that church, she stood up after the other one said something to me, and she just said, Rebecca, I welcome your anger.
Nice.
And I feel like that's the whole thing. It's like, let me be angry and you don't need to fucking say anything.
Right.
You don't need to say anything.
Well, and here's another thing that I want to say, because James had asked a question earlier about whether people can even be. And I'm going to say yes. I think I said it as soon as you were talking about it.
I'm still not sure I agree with you, though. I want to hear what you...
Well, but no, there are people who live their lives, being down. So what I would say is, it's a hard thing to do, but if you are willing to take the time and the effort to build those relationships and to have true friendships and to be engaged, it actually helps. I have white friends who are like, shoot, I got a couple of white friends that are more down than me. I'm like, oh,
But here's my thing is, and this is, and I'm, I recognize that I'm presently making the conversation about me and my white allyship, but this is what we're talking about, right?
Go ahead.
And a big thesis of this show is, you guys have told me a big thesis of the show is for nice white people to listen and maybe get some information that they don't all the time. For me, my perspective is, even if I become that person, even if I am as involved as humanly possible, I'm never the hog.
Right, but
I will only be the
that's
head.
okay.
Right.
And to
you don't
recognize
have to be a
and
hog.
understand that and not
okay.
try to cop the position of the hog.
But the other thing is, you can't be waving your flag and yelling about how much work you're doing.
Sure.
And that's the difference, I think. And that's, I think.
And I think it's even more complicated than that. This is probably for another show because it can go real deep. But as another example of the kind of thing you're talking about, I know people who they think that because they don't hate people of color,
Sure.
because they're in a relationship with a person of color, that's evidence on its face that they cannot be racist or
Hashtag
prejudiced.
Rapaport.
Now, on the other side of that, I also have friends who are in fact down. Okay? White friends who actually do know because they've taken the long time to do that work. So there's nothing about skin color that makes or prevents any individual from doing whatever they want to do. You know, it's really more about what is your experience and what work are you willing to do, right? And Michael Rapaport is an interesting example because here's where it gets muddled. You know, Michael Rapaport has done some work.
Sure.
Okay? He's done some work. I mean, he's not just like appropriating black folks and black folks' culture. He's not just doing, he's grown up a certain way and he made certain decisions, done some stuff. The thing is that there's still white privilege where people feel like they're entitled to be blacker than they are just because they want to be. You know, or people feel like they're supposed to get special love because, you know, I'm making sacrifices to speak for your people. So don't be calling me out. Come on. Come on. It's not that simple. And there's this difference between being involved and being committed. Because like you're saying, and many people say this, you know, mainstream folks just don't have the experience of the pain of being oppressed. The oppressor doesn't have that experience. And even when I say the oppressor, I don't mean that every member of the oppressors have any intent or direct.
Sure, but you benefit.
You know, but the people who benefit, they have no clue, and they're not going to have a clue because they and their children are not in danger of losing their lives or being beaten up or health disparities or housing disparities. That's not something that, you know, the people in the dominant culture actually experience. And so it is interesting and it is hard to deal with. I mean, what do? Do you not talk to white people anymore? You know, I mean,
it's gonna be tough for me considering what my kid looks like.
No. I mean, that again.
You're gonna have to learn to run this podcast shit too.
I already said you was one of the good ones.
One of the good ones. But I mean, that's how complicated it is. I mean, because, you know, this is a Michael Jackson line that's one of my favorites from I forget the song, but it's in The Wiz. So here's our situation. You can't win. You can't break even, and you can't get out of the game.
On that note, we're going to take a little break. So this is kind of like, you know, on the Daily Show, they do that moment of Zen. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to do a moment of Zen here with the news clip. And Atlanta's news anchor, Sharon Reed, got a little message from Kathy Ray, in which she called Sharon Reed a nigger. Mm-hmm. And Sharon Reed Did
She actually wrote Niger.
Right.
oh yeah, that's true.
Can't
She
even
didn't
spell
she
it.
can't even
Yeah.
spell. Okay, so she called her. Wait, let me start over.
No.
She
No,
called
you got
her
the
a Niger.
the intent is more important than the
No.
grammar.
I think it was good the way you did it. Right.
No, but it was so. And then she did the most beautiful black woman, like, clap back, you're in trouble, and no one even knows, like, the secret hand signals. Like, that was all over, like, Black Twitter and stuff. But, you know, she is, like, my hero right now.
Can we? So let's play the audio really quick.
A woman by the name of Kathy Ray emailed me. We're gonna put that email on the screen and then I'll comment. You need to be fired for the race-baiting comment you made tonight. It's okay for blacks to discuss certain subjects, but not whites. Really? You are what I call a, now she tried to write the N-word, but she spelled it. I wish we would just put it on the screen. It's after 9 o'clock at night. People have the right to see it. She wrote Niger, not a black person. You are a racist, Niger. You are what's wrong with the world. And so I would say to Kathy a couple of things. Number one, you mischaracterized what I said. I didn't say that white people couldn't talk about race. Quite the contrary. We think that race is an authentic discussion to have. It's one we're having tonight because it's one many of you are talking about at home. And it's one that has clearly entered the Atlanta mayor's race. And that's why behind the scenes, my colleagues and I, white and black, we decided, hey, let's go for it, right? Because we do try to keep it real here, and I think we do a very good job of it. So I think when arguing with somebody, you have to be careful not to mischaracterize their viewpoint. So I won't mischaracterize your view either, Kathy Ray. I get it. On December 5th, 2017, you think it's okay to call this journalist a nigger. I don't. But I could clap back and say a few things to you. But instead, I'll let your words, Kathy Ray, speak for themselves. And that'll be the last word.
So good. Oh, wasn't that great? No,
But I thought it was good for many reasons. Number one, she did directly address it, which was excellent. And she didn't go in like she could have gone in. I was almost wanting to be her friend because I wanted to almost hear what she really thought. Because she said, in part of her response, I'm not going to do it a certain way. I'm not going to do it a certain way. I'm addressing it.
Yeah.
I'm addressing it, but I'm not going to go where you went.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what?
well, not only that, but I don't think it was even so much of a taking the high road. I think it was really just a thing of just what you've said is so ugly. Let's just put it out there with your name on it. And let's just show it for what it is. And that in itself is so debasing to you as a human being that I don't need to sit here and dump on you.
But I feel like, and so I agree to a certain extent. I think that's a high road. I think that's a white road because I feel like, and I don't know her, but I feel like a black road.
She needs that job. She likes it.
Right. No. She did it.
Well.
She did it in a way. She blew it up in a way that was direct
Yeah.
and forthright
Yeah.
and could work mainstream.
Yeah.
And my feeling is, and I don't know, I don't know. I would love to also be a fly on the wall. What she said when she got home.
Well, this leads to, but so I'm, one of the reasons why I'm interested in this, aside from it is a moment of zen of just what a great clip it is just to hear her.
Oh, amazing.
Is, so I don't know if you followed up on this story or read any other stuff. Kathy Ray, her last name is not Ray.
Oh, yeah. I know her real name, and I've seen it. So Black Twitter will get
Her
you.
her email account got doxxed. They figured out who she was.
Wow.
They figured out that she's some senior citizen, part-time bus driver for a local school district. I don't know what the end game of that story is. Presumably she's fired, and presumably she caught all kinds of hell.
Wow.
But so what's interesting about that is the two sides of it is if it was left with the anchor just reading this woman's words for her to sit here and internalize that shame. Would that have worked? Would it have been effective? Because what really ended up happening is we found out the woman's name. We found out who she was. And we found out there's the nice lady bus driver from the local school district, and this is the kind of shit that she does in her free time in the evening when she's watching the news. And is that ultimately, should that have been what the news anchor did in the first place?
I don't know.
Called her out.
Put her last name on there.
Yeah.
I mean, if Black Twitter figured out that woman's real name, occupation, and address in an afternoon, certainly the news could have.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a tough question.
Because that would have been really taking it to the next level.
So I don't know. I mean, I think the way I would answer your question is this. I personally would not have done it that way. I personally would not have made it possible for the offender to be identified.
Why?
Why?
I don't know, because the point that I would want to make about the offense could be made without the name. So I'm going to go Chris Rock on you guys and just say, I wouldn't have done that myself personally, but I understand.
Right.
You know, I understand. I'm not upset that it happened that way. I have, I'm not trying to be a defender. And so I think we respond to things according to our style and personality and situation. And so I just knowing myself, I would definitely not have let that go. I definitely would have called it out. I would have called it out in much the same way. I probably would not have. I probably would have been careful not to identify the person. Just I don't know. It's just a thing, and mostly, like I said, because I think I could make the same point.
But she identified herself by posting a public post.
Yeah, I know.
It wasn't public though, right? It was emailed directly, I think. Not saying that's an argument
Do you
against identifying
further-
her, but I'm saying that I think it was a direct email.
Right. If you're bold enough to like send that kind of communication, offensive, yay, you got to take your lumps however they come. And so I'm not saying that it was wrong to do that. I'm just saying that I personally wouldn't have done that way because I could drop that mic and make the point. And I wouldn't necessarily care about whether the person was outed or
But this is Atlanta, and Atlanta is a diverse city.
shit. Yeah.
And that woman is a bus driver, and she drives black children.
Atlanta ain't all that diverse. How diverse is Atlanta?
It's Chocolate City, baby.
That's Chocolate City.
It's Hotlanta.
Well, okay. What I mean is Atlanta is a city with a lot of black people.
Right, okay.
Is what I mean.
Right, yeah.
And what I mean is that...
Which is another reason why I wouldn't have done it. If it's a white lady, what is the race? Because it gets hot in Atlanta. They call it Hotlanta.
Yeah.
And I can make my point.
Why should that lady get to wake up in the morning and drive a school bus full of black children?
Shouldn't.
I can't defend that. So I'm not trying to like say it should.
I'm not saying I would have done it. I'm just saying
I'm saying that if I were that news anchor,
There you go.
I would not have my job anymore. Because I would have said some shit right on the air. I would have been doing all kinds of stuff. I feel like I couldn't have kept it as calm as she did.
She was amazing.
So, Sharon Reed, we salute you.
We do. Salute.
It's a real moment.
Yeah.
It's a real moment like that on local news.
I think we're going to keep having moments.
Yeah.
And we're going to have them all the time. And as we wrap it up, I just would like to say, Michael Rapaport can suck my dick. Okay, what do I say now?
All right.
We'll do one collaboratively. Off Color is a presentation of
Henderson Diggs.
production and sound engineering by
James Meekum.
Find us on the internet at www.
Offcolorpod.com.
and also
On Twitter.
and Facebook.
At where?
Off Color Pod. You can also find us on Stitcher and iTunes and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
All around the world for fun.
Cut.